The morning sun warmed the rows of vegetables as Maylene bent to harvest the season's first tomatoes. Her weathered hands moved with practiced care, placing each ripe fruit into her woven basket. At 42, her face showed lines earned from years working under the open sky, her simple clothes stained with honest soil. To anyone passing by her roadside stand in the quiet town of Pine Creek, she was just another local farmer, nothing more. "Morning, Ms. Lynn," called Mr. Grayson from his mail truck. "Got something for you today." May smiled and wiped her hands on her faded jeans. "Bills as usual? Afraid this one looks official." He handed her a thick envelope bearing the county courthouse seal. "Thanks," she said, tucking it under her arm to read later. Official mail rarely brought good news. After finishing her harvest, May sat at her weathered kitchen table, the envelope now seeming to grow larger before her eyes. She sliced it open carefully and scanned the contents, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern. It was a summons for a property dispute hearing, claiming she had violated zoning ordinances on her 5-acre farm. "Ridiculous," she muttered, reading further. The complaint had been filed by Westridge Development Corporation, a name she recognized from local news about luxury housing projects springing up around town. What caught her attention wasn't just the baseless claims about her property. It was the signature at the bottom, Judge Theodore Reynolds. May felt a chill despite the warm kitchen. Few people in Pine Creek knew that May Lynn had another life before moving here 8 years ago. In that life, she had graduated at the top of her class from Yale Law School and worked at one of Boston's most prestigious firms. She had argued cases before the Supreme Court and was on track to become a judge herself, until she witnessed how deeply corruption had infected the system she once believed in. Judge Reynolds had been at the center of a case she investigated, a case involving kickbacks from development companies. A case that mysteriously disappeared from the docket when key witnesses suddenly changed their testimonies. May had gathered enough evidence to prove Reynolds' corruption, but her firm unexpectedly dropped the investigation. When she pushed forward alone, she found herself blacklisted, her reputation smeared. Rather than fight a rigged system, May chose to disappear. She bought the small farm with her savings, changed her appearance, and became the quiet farmer everyone now knew. She kept her law books hidden in a locked chest in her attic, occasionally reading them late at night when she missed her former life. Now, staring at Reynolds' signature, she realized her past had somehow found her. The hearing date was just 2 weeks away. That evening, May climbed to her attic and unlocked the old chest. Dust danced in the air as she lifted the lid, revealing neatly stacked law texts and case files. Her fingers traced the embossed letters of her legal dictionary, remembering the weight of responsibility that came with knowledge. She pulled out a notepad and began analyzing the summons. After an hour, she had identified 3 procedural errors that would be obvious to any competent attorney. The filing date was incorrect, the property description contained deliberate inaccuracies, and the ordinances cited didn't even apply to agricultural land her size. This wasn't just a routine property dispute. This was targeted. The next morning, May drove to the county records office. The clerk, a young man with kind eyes named Ray, helped her access public records on recent development projects. "Looking for anything specific?" Ray asked as May flipped through files. "Just curious about who's buying land around Pine Creek," she replied casually. Ray lowered his voice. "Between us, Westridge has been gobbling up everything they can. Your place sits right where they want to build their new access road." May nodded, and Judge Reynolds seems to rule in their favor quite often. "Every single time," Ray confirmed, glancing around nervously. "My cousin lost her family farm last year. The case made no sense, but Reynolds shut down every objection." On her drive home, May passed 3 farms now sitting empty, construction equipment parked where crops once grew. A billboard advertised Pinewood Estates luxury living coming soon, with a smiling family standing before a mansion that would cost more than most locals earned in 20 years. Back at her kitchen table, May faced a decision. She could hire an attorney, but local lawyers wouldn't stand against Reynolds, and outside counsel might bring unwanted attention to her past. She could sell her land and disappear again, but that would mean running forever. Or she could represent herself, knowing Reynolds would expect an easy victory against a simple farmer. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was her neighbor, Eleanor, an elderly woman who had taught May everything she knew about farming. I heard about the summons, Eleanor said without preamble. Reynolds is coming for your place now. How did you know? May asked, surprised. Small town. No secrets. Eleanor's voice trembled slightly. I lost my Western field to the same scheme last spring. Couldn't afford a lawyer after my husband's medical bills. May felt anger rising in her chest. What if I fight it? Eleanor sighed. Nobody wins against Reynolds and those developers. They've got the whole system in their pocket. After hanging up, May made her decision. She climbed back to the attic and brought down her entire collection of law books. Spreading them across her kitchen table, she began to prepare her defense, careful not to leave any traces of her research where visitors might see. For the next week, May lived two lives. During daylight hours, she tended her crops and sold vegetables at her stand, smiling and chatting with customers as if nothing had changed. At night, she transformed back into the brilliant legal mind she had once been, building a case not just to save her farm, but to expose Reynolds' corruption. 3 days before the hearing, a black SUV parked at the end of her driveway. Two men in expensive suits approached her stand where May was arranging bell peppers. Ms. Lynn? The taller one didn't offer his hand. I'm Richard Westbrook, CEO of Westridge Development. This is my attorney, Peter Collins. May nodded politely, her expression neutral. What can I help you with? Looking for fresh vegetables? Westbrook smiled without warmth. We'd like to discuss the upcoming hearing. There's no need to make this difficult. I'm just a farmer defending my land, May replied, carefully selecting her words to sound unsophisticated. Not sure what could be easier than the truth. Collins stepped forward with a document. We're prepared to offer you fair market value for your property, considerably more than you'd get if the judge rules against you, which, he exchanged a look with Westbrook, is the likely outcome. May examined the offer, noticing it was dated before the summons was even issued. That's mighty confident of you, she said, adding a slight rural accent to her voice. But this land has been my home for 8 years. I aim to keep it that way, Ms. Lynn. Westbrook's tone hardened. Judge Reynolds has a perfect record with these cases. You can't win. Take the money while it's offered. May returned to arranging her vegetables. Guess I'll see you both in court then. As they drove away, May allowed herself a small smile. Their visit had confirmed everything she suspected and given her valuable information about their strategy. The night before the hearing, May couldn't sleep. She stood at her bedroom window, looking out over her small farm bathed in moonlight, the rows of vegetables, the chicken coop she had built herself, the old oak tree where she read on summer afternoons. This was her sanctuary. She had run away once before. She wouldn't run again. At dawn, she dressed carefully, choosing clothes that were clean and presentable but deliberately modest. She braided her hair simply and wore minimal makeup. From a distance, she appeared exactly as everyone in Pine Creek knew her. A hard-working farmer of modest means. Only the contents of her worn leather satchel suggested otherwise. Inside were precisely organized notes, relevant case law, and documentation of Reynolds's previous suspicious rulings. Information that would remain hidden until exactly the right moment. Time to plant different seeds, May whispered to herself as she got into her old pickup truck and drove toward the courthouse, ready to take on the corrupt judge who had no idea who he was really facing. The Pine Creek County Courthouse stood like an island of stone in a sea of asphalt. Its weathered columns and imposing steps had intimidated generations of locals. For May, though, the building stirred different emotions, nostalgia, determination, and a touch of the old fire that had once driven her legal career. She parked her truck between a row of luxury cars, her mud-splattered vehicle looking distinctly out of place. As she climbed the courthouse steps, May noticed other farmers gathered in small groups speaking in hushed tones. They nodded respectfully as she passed, word having spread about her defiance against Westridge. "Don't get your hopes up," murmured an older man as she reached the top. "That's Frank," he added, pointing to a harried-looking man rushing up the steps with an overflowing briefcase. "They assigned him to my case. Public defender who couldn't even remember my name." May thanked him with a smile and pushed through the heavy oak doors into the cool interior. The marble floors amplified every footstep as she made her way to courtroom C. Outside the door, the same nervous-looking public defender was shuffling through papers. "Ms. Lynn?" he called out when he spotted her. "Frank Wilson, County Public Defender. Judge Reynolds assigned me to your case 10 minutes ago. He thrust his hand out, dropping several papers in the process. May helped him gather the scattered documents. Thank you, Mr. Wilson, but I'll be representing myself today. Frank's face paled. That's a terrible idea. Reynolds will eat you alive. He hates self-representation, says it slows down his courtroom. I'm sure he does, May replied quietly, but it's still my right. Frank lowered his voice. Look, I know my help isn't worth much with my caseload, but Reynolds and Westridge have this whole thing choreographed. Last month, a man lost his family's 100-year-old orchard in under 20 minutes. May patted his arm. I appreciate the warning, Mr. Wilson. Perhaps you could do me one favor, though. What's that? Sit in the gallery. Watch what happens. Inside the courtroom, polished wood gleamed under bright lights. The room was surprisingly full, not just with farmers, but also town residents curious about the woman challenging the system that had claimed so many local properties. At the plaintiff's table sat Peter, Collins, and another attorney from Westridge, both typing on sleek laptops. They barely glanced up as May took her place at the defendant's table, setting down her worn leather satchel. A side door opened and the clerk called out, "All rise for the Honorable Judge Theodore Reynolds." The judge swept in, black robes flowing behind him. At 65, Reynolds had a full head of silver hair and the confident bearing of a man accustomed to absolute authority. He settled into his chair and peered over half-moon glasses at the courtroom. "Be seated," he commanded, his voice filling the room without effort. He shuffled papers, deliberately ignoring May for nearly a minute before looking up with manufactured surprise. "Ms. Lynn, where is your counsel?" May rose, keeping her posture slightly hunched. "I'll be representing myself, Your Honor." Reynolds frowned. "That's ill-advised. Mr. Wilson is present and prepared to—" "With respect." "Your Honor," May interrupted softly. "Under State Statute 46.2c, I'm entitled to self-representation in civil proceedings." A flicker of annoyance crossed Reynolds' face. "Very well. Your funeral." He turned to Collins. "Counsel, present your case." Peter Collins approached the bench with practiced confidence. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward zoning violation. Ms. Lynn's property at 1624 County Line Road is being used for commercial farming in an area recently rezoned for residential development. We have documentation showing she was properly notified of the zoning change 6 months ago and failed to comply or appeal within the statutory period." Reynolds nodded. "Seems clear enough." May stood. "Objection, Your Honor. I never received any notification of a zoning change." "Overruled," Reynolds snapped without looking at her. "The county maintains records of all notifications." "May I see these records?" May asked. Collins smoothly produced a document. "We have the certified mail receipt right here, Your Honor, signed by a M. Lynn on February 12th. The bailiff brought the document to May. She studied it carefully, noting the signature that looked nothing like her own. "Your Honor, this isn't my signature. I request the court compare it with my driver's license signature on file." Reynolds waved dismissively. "Ms. Lynn, falsifying mail fraud accusations won't help your case." "I'm not making accusations," May replied calmly. "I'm simply stating a fact. Additionally, the property description in the complaint references Parcel 14B, which is not my land, but the adjacent property owned by the county itself as protected wetlands." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Collins quickly consulted his colleague, their whispered conversation growing heated. Reynolds glared at the disturbance. "Order. Ms. Lynn, these technical objections only delay the inevitable. The substance of the complaint stands regardless of clerical errors. With respect, Your Honor," May countered, pulling a document from her satchel. "According to Henderson v. State County Board 2018, a misidentification of property in a zoning complaint constitutes grounds for immediate dismissal, as it fails to establish jurisdiction over the actual property in question." Reynolds' face darkened as Collins hurriedly approached the bench. They spoke in hushed tones while May stood perfectly still, her expression neutral despite the victory she'd just scored. Finally, Reynolds cleared his throat. "The court will take a 15-minute recess to address the clerical issues raised by the defendant." As the gallery buzzed with conversation, Frank Wilson slid into the seat beside May. "What just happened?" he whispered. "Reynolds never takes breaks during preliminary hearings. They filed the wrong paperwork," May explained quietly. "They were so certain I wouldn't fight back, they got sloppy. When court resumed, Collins approached with revised documents. Your Honor, we've corrected the property designation. We also have the county assessor here to verify the zoning change was properly recorded. A nervous man in a rumpled suit was sworn in. He testified that May's property had indeed been rezoned in January, effective immediately for new construction, but with a 1-year grace period for existing uses. So, May asked during cross-examination, my current use is actually permitted for another 7 months? The assessor blinked. Well, yes, technically, but no further questions, May said, sitting down as Collins jumped to his feet in protest. Reynolds's frustration was now plainly visible. Mr. Collins, explain why we're pursuing action before the grace period expires. Collins fumbled with his papers. The development timeline requires immediate... He stopped, realizing his mistake. Requires what exactly? May asked innocently. That's enough, Reynolds interrupted. The court understands Westridge's eagerness to proceed with approved development plans. May stood again. Your Honor, I'd like to introduce the County Land Use Code, Section 38, which specifically states that grace periods cannot be circumvented for private development interests, regardless of timeline pressures. Reynolds turned a dangerous shade of red. Ms. Lynn, are you a lawyer? No, Your Honor. Just a farmer who can read. Laughter rippled through the courtroom before Reynolds silenced it with a bang of his gavel. This hearing will continue next Monday. Ms. Lynn, I advise you to reconsider settlement before then. Westridge's offer is quite generous compared to what you might receive if this court finds willful violations. As people filed out, May felt a gentle tap on her shoulder. It was Ray from the records office, his eyes darting nervously around the room. That was amazing, he whispered. But be careful. Reynolds is meeting with Westridge's people tonight at the Lakeside restaurant. Private room. Happens before all these cases. May thanked him with a slight nod. Outside on the courthouse steps, several farmers gathered around her. How did you know all that legal stuff? Asked an older woman whose orchard bordered May's property. Library books, May answered with a smile. And the internet. Well, whatever you're doing, keep it up, said another farmer. First time I've seen Reynolds sweat. As the crowd dispersed, May noticed a sleek car parked across the street, Richard Westbrook watching her through tinted windows. She met his gaze steadily before turning toward her truck. That evening, May sat at her kitchen table, legal books spread around her, making notes for Monday's hearing. A knock at her door startled her. She quickly covered the books with a tablecloth before answering. Frank Wilson stood on her porch, looking even more disheveled than before. I had to come. You need to know what you're up against. May invited him in, offering tea, which he declined with a shaky hand. I've been Reynolds' public defender puppet for 3 years, he explained, pacing her small living room. They assign me to cases they want to lose. I have 60 active files and no time to prepare any of them properly. Why are you telling me this? May asked. Frank stopped pacing. Because today I saw something I haven't seen in years. Someone standing up to them. But they're already planning how to crush you. How do you know? I was at the lakeside picking up dinner. Overheard Reynolds and Westbrook in the private room. Frank lowered his voice. They're digging into your past, May. Reynolds knows there's more to you than a simple farmer. And he's angry. Said something about making an example of you. May's face remained calm, but her mind raced. Thank you for the warning. After Frank left, May climbed to her attic and opened a locked box she hadn't touched in years. Inside lay her old credentials, newspaper clippings of cases she'd won and photographs of a different life. At the bottom was a sealed envelope containing evidence of Reynolds' past corruption, evidence she'd never had the chance to use. Time to stop holding back, she whispered to herself, removing the contents of the envelope. The preliminary skirmish was over. Now the real battle would begin. The weekend passed in a blur as May prepared for Monday's hearing. Rain pattered against her windows while she reviewed old case files, refreshing her memory on precedents she hadn't thought about in years. The evidence of Reynolds' corruption lay spread across her kitchen table. Photographs of meetings with developers, bank records showing suspicious deposits, transcripts of testimonies that had mysteriously changed. A knock at her door Sunday afternoon pulled her from her research. May quickly gathered the sensitive documents, hiding them under a loose floorboard beneath her rug before answering. Eleanor, her elderly neighbor, stood on the porch holding a covered dish. Brought you some stew. Figured you might be too busy to cook. That's very kind, May said, inviting her in. Eleanor settled at the kitchen table, eyes drifting to the legal books May hadn't managed to hide. My late husband was a paralegal. Recognize those books anywhere. She tapped a worn volume. You're not just any farmer, are you, dear? May hesitated, then sat down across from her. It's complicated. Always is. Eleanor poured them both tea. This town was different before Reynolds became judge. People trusted the courts. Now every month someone loses their land to those vultures. She studied May's face. You know more than you let on. I used to be a lawyer, May admitted. In another life. Eleanor nodded, unsurprised. Thought so. Way you handled yourself in court Friday, that wasn't beginner's luck. How did you know about that? Small towns have big ears. Half the county's talking about how a farmer made Reynolds squirm. Eleanor reached across the table and patted May's hand. Whatever you're planning, you should know they're watching your place. May's stomach tightened. What do you mean? Black car parked down by the creek bridge since yesterday. 2 men with cameras, taking pictures of everyone coming and going. After Eleanor left, May moved carefully around her house, staying away from windows. Through a gap in her curtains, she spotted the black sedan Eleanor had mentioned, partially hidden among trees by the creek. That night, May made a decision. She couldn't continue playing defense. By dawn, she had formulated a plan that would either save her farm or force her to run again, this time with no hope of rebuilding her quiet life. Monday morning arrived with clearing skies. May dressed carefully, still modest clothing but slightly more professional than before. She loaded 2 boxes of documents into her truck, then took a detour to avoid passing the surveillance car. The courthouse buzzed with unusual activity. Word had spread about Friday's hearing, drawing a crowd of curious onlookers and farmers facing similar legal troubles. As May carried her boxes up the steps, people moved aside, watching her with a mixture of hope and skepticism. Frank Wilson waited outside the courtroom, looking more composed than before. They've been digging into your background all weekend, he whispered. Reynolds has a private investigator on retainer. Let them dig, May replied calmly. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Judge Reynolds entered, his face a mask of professional detachment, but May caught the gleam of satisfaction in his eyes. He clearly believed he had something on her. Before we continue Friday's proceedings, Reynolds announced, the court has become aware of potential misrepresentation by the defendant. He fixed May with a stern look. Ms. Lynn, did you ever attend law school or practice law in any capacity? A hushed silence fell over the room. May stood, straightening her posture slightly. Yes, Your Honor, I did. Murmurs erupted through the gallery. Reynolds banged his gavel. Order. Ms. Lynn, you presented yourself as a simple farmer with no legal training. This court considers that deceptive. With respect, Your Honor, May replied, her voice stronger now. I never claimed to lack legal training. I simply said I would represent myself. My background wasn't relevant until you directly asked. Reynolds' jaw tightened. This court takes a dim view of games, Ms. Lynn. Or should I say, Ms. Chen? The room fell silent again. May felt her heart pound but kept her expression neutral. So they had discovered her real name. How much more did they know? My legal name is Mei Lin Chen, she acknowledged. I've used Mei Lin since moving to Pine Creek. And you were once a partner at Bradshaw and Winters in Boston, specializing in corporate law, were you not? I was, Reynolds leaned forward. And you suddenly abandoned your career 8 years ago after making serious accusations against several judges and attorneys. Accusations that were never substantiated. The fact that accusations weren't pursued doesn't mean they weren't substantiated, May countered, earning another round of murmurs from the gallery. Peter Collins stood adjusting his tie. Your Honor, this revelation calls into question the defendant's credibility and motives in this case. We move to dismiss her objections as part of a personal vendetta. Reynolds nodded. I'm inclined to agree. Miss Chen clearly has ulterior. Respectfully, Your Honor, May interrupted. My legal background has no bearing on the merits of this case. The court must still address Westridge's attempt to circumvent the legally mandated grace period, as well as the falsified notification of rezoning. Don't presume to lecture me on what this court must do, Reynolds snapped. May opened one of her boxes. In that case, I'd like to introduce new evidence directly relevant to this proceeding. She removed a folder and approached the bench. Collins jumped to his feet. Objection. No new evidence was disclosed during discovery. There was no discovery period, May pointed out. This was scheduled as a summary hearing with immediate judgment. If the court now wishes to treat it as a full proceeding, I welcome the opportunity for complete discovery, including depositions of county officials regarding the rezoning process. Reynolds' face flushed. He knew she had trapped him, either accept her evidence now or delay for proper discovery, which would buy her the months needed to reach the end of the grace period. Submit your evidence, he growled. May handed copies to the clerk, Collins, and the judge. These documents show that the rezoning of my property and surrounding lands was conducted without the required environmental impact study. Additionally, the county commissioner's vote was held without proper public notice in violation of state transparency laws. Collins flipped through the pages, his confident expression faltering. Reynolds studied the documents, his knuckles white as he gripped them. Furthermore, May continued, I have included communications between Westridge Development and county officials discussing the need to expedite and quietly handle the rezoning before farmers could make a fuss. These communications preceded any public announcement of the rezoning plan. Where did you obtain these? Reynolds demanded. Public records request, Your Honor. Everything properly documented and certified by the county clerk's office. From the gallery, Ray gave her a subtle thumbs up. He had helped her locate these records late Sunday night, working after hours to provide copies with official stamps. Reynolds conferred with Collins in hushed, urgent tones. The courtroom waited in tense silence. When they finished, Reynolds cleared his throat. This court will recess until tomorrow morning to review these materials. He fixed May with a cold stare. Ms. Chen, be advised that any evidence obtained through improper means will be grounds for sanctions. All evidence was obtained legally, Your Honor, May assured him. I look forward to discussing it in detail tomorrow. As people filed out, Frank Wilson caught up with May. That was brilliant, he whispered. But they're not going to let this go. Reynolds just called his clerk to arrange a dinner meeting with Westbrook tonight. I'm counting on it, May replied quietly. Outside, a group of farmers waited for her. The older man who had spoken to her on Friday stepped forward. We've been fighting these land grabs for 2 years, he said. Never seen anyone stand up to them like you did in there. A woman added, My family lost our dairy farm last month. Same playbook. Sudden rezoning, no notice, quick hearing. May looked at their weathered faces, saw the mixture of hope and resignation. This isn't just about my farm anymore, is it? Not by a long shot, the man confirmed. You're fighting for all of us now. That evening, instead of returning home, May drove to a small motel on the edge of town. She had spotted another surveillance car near the courthouse and didn't want anyone following her. In her motel room, she spread out her remaining documents and began preparing for tomorrow's confrontation. Her phone rang, Eleanor checking on her. They came to your house, the elderly woman reported. 2 men in suits. Said they were water department, but they were looking through windows. Did they go inside? No, I walked over with my shotgun. Told them I was watching the place while you were out of town. They left, but they weren't happy. May thanked her, then called Ray. Did you get it? She asked when he answered. Just like you thought, Ray confirmed. Reynolds made a reservation at the lakeside for 8 p.m. Private room again. And the other thing? Got it this afternoon. It's all there. Records of every case where Reynolds ruled in favor of Westridge, property transfers, tax assessments showing values before and after. The pattern is impossible to miss, May smiled. Perfect. One more thing, can you get me the number for Channel 5 News? Already did. Reporters very interested in your story. Said to call any time. May ended the call and stared at her case notes. Tomorrow would determine everything. Reynolds and Westridge believed they had weakened her position by exposing her past. But they had actually freed her to use all her legal skills openly. She fingered the business card Ray had slipped her. Lisa Wong, investigative reporter. The final piece of her strategy was falling into place. For the first time in years, May felt truly alive. The courtroom energy, the legal maneuvering, the pursuit of justice, these were the things she had once lived for. She had run away once, believing the system too corrupt to change. Now she had a chance to fight back. Not just for herself, but for an entire community that had become her home. She picked up her phone and dialed the reporter's number. It was time to shine a light on what happened in the darkness. Morning light filtered through the motel curtains as May reviewed her notes one final time. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lisa Wong. In position. Camera crew on standby. May took a deep breath. There would be no going back after today. When she arrived at the courthouse, she was surprised to find a crowd gathered outside. Word had spread about the farmer who was standing up to Judge Reynolds and Westridge Development. Some people held handmade signs, "Save our farms" and "Stop corrupt rezoning." As May climbed the steps, a news van pulled up. Lisa Wong, a sharp-eyed reporter in her 30s, jumped out with a cameraman following close behind. "Ms. Chen," she called, "can you comment on your allegations against Judge Reynolds?" Before May could answer, Frank Wilson appeared at her side. "No comments before the hearing," he said, guiding her through the crowd. Inside the courthouse, Frank whispered urgently, "Reynolds is furious. The news crew tried to get into his chambers this morning asking about his connections to Westridge." "Good," May said quietly. "Not good. He's called in another judge, Patricia Howard, from the county seat. They're discussing whether to dismiss your case outright." May nodded calmly. "I expected something like this." "Is Howard in Reynolds' pocket too?" "No, that's the thing. Howard's known for being scrupulously fair. Reynolds might have miscalculated." The courtroom was packed beyond capacity when they entered. Reynolds sat at the bench, his face a thundercloud, with a stern-looking woman beside him. Judge Howard, May presumed. Peter Collins and 2 additional attorneys occupied the plaintiff's table, their usually sleek appearance slightly disheveled, suggesting a night of emergency preparation. Reynolds gavelled the room to silence. "Before we proceed, I've asked Judge Howard to join these proceedings in an advisory capacity, given the unusual nature of the case." Judge Howard nodded to the gallery. "I'll be observing only, as this remains Judge Reynolds' courtroom." May recognized this for what it was, Reynolds attempting to create the appearance of propriety while maintaining control. "Now, regarding the evidence submitted yesterday," Reynolds continued, "the court finds it inadequate to halt these proceedings. The rezoning was properly approved by county commissioners." "Objection, Your Honor," May interrupted, standing. "The court cannot simply declare evidence inadequate without analysis or testimony. I request the opportunity to present witnesses regarding the rezoning process." Reynolds's knuckles whitened around his gavel. "Ms. Chen, this is not a trial but a hearing. We don't need witnesses." "With respect," May countered, "you've just made factual determinations that can only be properly established through testimony. Either this is a summary proceeding, in which case you cannot make factual findings contradicting my evidence, or it's an evidentiary hearing, in which case I'm entitled to call witnesses." Judge Howard leaned over to whisper something to Reynolds, whose expression soured further. "Fine," he snapped. "You may call one witness." "I call Richard Westbrook, CEO of Westridge Development," May announced. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Westbrook, sitting behind his attorney, straightened in surprise. Collins jumped up. "Objection. Mr. Westbrook isn't prepared to testify today." "Mr. Westbrook is the plaintiff in this action," May pointed out. "He should certainly be prepared to speak to the facts of his own case." Judge Howard nodded slightly to Reynolds, who reluctantly said, "Overruled." "Mr. Westbrook, please take the stand." As Westbrook was sworn in, May noticed Lisa Wong slip into the back of the courtroom with a small notebook. "Perfect timing." "Mr. Westbrook," May began, "when did Westridge first become interested in acquiring land in the Pine Creek area?" Westbrook straightened his tie. "Approximately 3 years ago, as part of our expansion strategy." "And when did you first discuss this expansion with Judge Reynolds?" "Objection," Collins shouted. "Leading and assumes facts not in evidence." "Sustained," Reynolds said quickly. May nodded pleasantly. "Mr. Westbrook, have you ever met with Judge Reynolds outside of court?" Westbrook hesitated, glancing at Reynolds. "We've attended the same community events, including private dinners at the Lakeside restaurant." Another hesitation. "Perhaps once or twice for charity functions." May removed a document from her folder. "I have here the private dining records from the Lakeside for the past 2 years, showing 17 separate reservations under your name, or Judge Reynolds, with both of you in attendance. These dinners coincide precisely with the dates of hearings involving Westridge property acquisitions." Westbrook's face flushed. "Business dinners aren't illegal." "True," May agreed. "But failing to disclose them when they create a conflict of interest is certainly unethical. Judge Reynolds has ruled on 23 cases involving Westridge in the past 2 years. He found in your favor 23 times. Judge Howard's expression grew increasingly troubled. Mr. Westbrook, May continued, when did you first see the rezoning proposal that affected my property? When it became public record, he answered stiffly. May held up another document. Then how do you explain this email from you to the county commissioners, dated 3 months before the rezoning was proposed, detailing exactly which properties would be rezoned and how quickly you could acquire them afterward? The courtroom erupted. Reynolds banged his gavel repeatedly. Order. Ms. Chen, where did you obtain that document? Public records request, Your Honor. The commissioner's emails are subject to transparency laws. May turned back to Westbrook. Mr. Westbrook, did you pay for the environmental impact study for the rezoning? Sweat beaded on his forehead. Westridge contributed to the county's assessment costs, yes. And did you select the firm that conducted the study? We may have recommended someone. May produced another document. The firm you recommended is a subsidiary of Westridge Development. You essentially paid yourself to approve your own project. Collins was on his feet again. Your Honor, this line of questioning goes far beyond the scope of a rezoning hearing. Judge Howard finally spoke. Actually, if these allegations are true, they go directly to the legitimacy of the rezoning itself. Reynolds shot her a warning look, which she ignored. May turned to address the court. Your Honors, this isn't just about my farm. It's about a systematic effort to seize agricultural land through manipulated rezoning, fake environmental studies, and judicial misconduct. She handed the clerk a thick folder. I'm submitting evidence of 27 similar cases where farmers lost their land through identical tactics. Judge Howard reached for the folder before Reynolds could object. As she flipped through pages, her expression grew increasingly grim. Furthermore, May continued, I have bank records showing substantial deposits to an offshore account linked to Judge Reynolds following each Westridge acquisition. Reynolds exploded. That's enough. This hearing is adjourned until further notice. Bailiff, clear the courtroom. Actually, Judge Howard said firmly, I'm invoking judicial oversight authority under State Code 39.4. This matter requires immediate review by the Judicial Ethics Committee. She turned to May. Ms. Chen, are you willing to present this evidence to a formal investigation? Absolutely, Your Honor. Reynolds turned purple. You have no authority to... I have every authority, Howard cut him off, when presented with credible evidence of judicial misconduct. This hearing is suspended pending investigation. She stood. Bailiff, please secure all court records related to Westridge development cases for the past 5 years. As the courtroom dissolved into chaos, May noticed Lisa Wong slipping out, phone already at her ear. The news would break within hours. Outside on the courthouse steps, May found herself surrounded by reporters and farmers. Through the crowd, she spotted Richard Westbrook being escorted to his car by stone-faced men who didn't look like his usual entourage, possibly law enforcement in plain clothes. Frank Wilson pushed through to her side. That was the most amazing thing I've ever seen in a courtroom, he said, his voice filled with awe. But it's not over. Westridge has powerful connections. They'll fight back. Let them, May replied. Everything's on record now and the media has the story. As if on cue, Lisa Wong appeared with her camera crew. Ms. Chen, can you tell us how a farmer managed to expose what appears to be one of the biggest corruption scandals in county history? Before May could answer, Eleanor pushed through the crowd and grabbed her hand. My dear, you need to come quickly. Your farm, what about my farm? May asked, suddenly alert. There's men there with bulldozers. They're claiming some kind of emergency demolition order. They've already knocked down your fence. May's blood ran cold. Westridge's backup plan, if they couldn't take her land legally, they'd destroy its value before the case could be resolved. I need to go, she told the reporters. But you should all come too. Bring your cameras. As word spread, a caravan formed behind May's truck. Reporters, farmers, townspeople. By the time they reached her property, more than 30 vehicles lined the road. 2 bulldozers sat at the edge of her field, engines running. A group of men in Westridge development jackets stood nearby, holding what looked like official papers. They hadn't expected an audience. May parked and walked directly toward them, the crowd following behind her. This is private property, she called out. You're trespassing. A man in a hard hat stepped forward. We have an emergency order to clear contaminated land. Signed by Judge Reynolds this morning. May I see it? May asked. He hesitated, then handed over the document. May scanned it quickly, then smiled. This order is for Parcel 14B, that's the wetlands property. This is Parcel 14A. She pointed to her property markers. You're on the wrong land. The man snatched back the paper, checking it himself. And, May added loudly enough for the cameras behind her to catch, Judge Reynolds no longer has jurisdiction over this case as of 30 minutes ago. He's been suspended pending investigation. The workers looked at each other uncertainly. The cameras moved closer, recording everything. I suggest you leave, May said calmly, before you add criminal trespass and attempted property destruction to the charges. For a moment, no one moved. Then the supervisor gestured to his crew. Pack it up now. As the bulldozers retreated and the crowd cheered, May felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Lisa Wong. The State Attorney General's office just announced they're opening an investigation into Judge Reynolds and Westridge development, she said. This is going to be much bigger than Pine Creek. May nodded, watching the bulldozers disappear down the road. She had won this battle, but the war wasn't over. Reynolds and Westridge still had resources and allies. They wouldn't go down without fighting. But for the first time in 8 years, May wasn't running anymore. She was standing her ground, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been crushed by the powerful and corrupt. Looking at the damaged fence around her beloved farm, May made a silent promise. This wasn't the end of her legal career, after all. It was a new beginning. The weeks following the courtroom showdown brought a whirlwind of changes to Pine Creek. May watched from her porch as the evening news played on every channel aerial shots of local farms, footage of Judge Reynolds being escorted from the courthouse, interviews with farmers who had lost their land. The state investigation has expanded to include 3 neighboring counties, the reporter announced. Authorities have frozen Westridge Development's assets pending criminal charges of fraud, bribery, and conspiracy. May sipped her tea, feeling a bittersweet satisfaction. The fight wasn't over. Legal battles rarely ended neatly, but the truth was finally coming to light. Her phone rang. Lisa Wong, who had become something of a friend over the past weeks. Thought you'd want to know, the reporter said without preamble. Reynolds resigned this morning. No statement, just cleared out his office before the Judicial Conduct Committee could formally remove him. And Westbrook? May asked, trying to cut a deal, offering to testify against the county commissioners and Reynolds in exchange for reduced charges. May thanked her and hung up, gazing across her fields in the fading light. The damaged fence had been repaired, not by her but by neighboring farmers who had shown up the day after the bulldozer incident with tools and materials. Farmers stick together, they had told her. A car approached down her long driveway, raising dust in the golden evening light. May recognized Judge Howard's sedan. The judge had taken over all of Reynolds' cases and had been working tirelessly to review every decision involving Westridge. Howard stepped out, looking tired but determined. "Hope I'm not intruding," she called. "Not at all," May replied, offering a chair on the porch. Howard settled in with a sigh. "Quite a view you have here." "Worth fighting for," May agreed. "That's partly why I came." Howard pulled a folder from her bag. "I've completed the review of 27 farm forfeitures. Every single one involved procedural irregularities, falsified documents, or due process violations. I'm overturning all of them." May's heart leapt. "The families can get their land back?" "It's complicated," Howard admitted. "Some properties have already been developed. Those families will receive fair market value plus damages. But for the 12 properties not yet developed, yes, the original owners can reclaim their land." Tears sprang to May's eyes as she thought of Eleanor and others who might return to their family farms. "There's something else," Howard continued. "The State Bar Association contacted me. They've reviewed the circumstances of your departure from legal practice in Boston." May stiffened. This was the part of her past she had tried hardest to leave behind. The smear campaign that had painted her as unstable and vindictive after she tried to expose corruption. "They're reopening the matter," Howard said, "with Reynolds and others now under investigation. Your allegations from 8 years ago suddenly seem quite credible." "That's..." May struggled to find words. "That's unexpected. They'd like you to testify if you're willing." "And..." Howard hesitated. "Your law license remains in good standing. It was never actually revoked." May sat back stunned. For years she had believed her legal career was irreparably damaged. "I'll consider it." she said finally. After Howard left, May walked through her fields, trailing her fingers over the tops of growing vegetables. The farm had become her sanctuary, her identity. The thought of returning to legal practice stirred complicated feelings, both excitement and dread. The next morning, a procession of cars and trucks wound up May's driveway. Farmers, townspeople, and even Frank Wilson emerged, carrying food dishes and folding chairs. "What's all this?" May asked as they began setting up tables in her yard. "Victory picnic," Eleanor explained. "Community wanted to thank you properly." Before May could protest, her property transformed into an impromptu festival. Children ran between rows of vegetables. A local band set up on the flatbed of a truck, and the aroma of home-cooked food filled the air. Frank approached, looking more confident than May had ever seen him. "I've got news," he said, beaming. "The county's creating an independent public defender's office with actual funding. They've asked me to run it." "That's wonderful," May said sincerely. "Will you take it?" "Already accepted. No more being Reynolds' puppet." His expression grew serious. "But we need more good attorneys. People who care about justice, not just winning." May understood the unspoken question. "I'm still figuring out my next steps." Throughout the day, people approached May with stories: land disputes, tenant issues, small businesses struggling against larger interests. They sought advice, shared grievances, asked if she might help. Each conversation tugged at something inside her, a sense of purpose she had once abandoned. As evening approached, Ray from the records office clinked a glass for attention. The crowd gathered around as he nervously cleared his throat. "Most of you know me as the county clerk who's always behind the counter," he began. "What you might not know is that for years I've been keeping records of everything that didn't seem right. Missing files, altered documents, suspicious patterns. I couldn't stop it, but I could document it." He turned to May. "When Ms. Chen walked into my office asking questions, it was like seeing the first ray of light after years of darkness. One person with courage changed everything." A cheer went up from the crowd. May felt her cheeks flush. "So," Ray continued, "we took up a collection, not for a gift but for a purpose." He handed May an envelope. "The deed to the old Miller building downtown. It needs work, but it's solid. We thought it would make a fine legal aid center, if someone were willing to run it." May opened the envelope with trembling hands, finding the property deed with her name listed as owner. She looked out at the expectant faces. "I don't know what to say." An older farmer spoke up. "Don't have to say anything. Just do what you do best. Fight for folks who need fighting for." Later that night, after everyone had gone, May sat alone on her porch. The Miller building had stood vacant for years, a handsome brick structure from the 1920s with large windows and wooden floors. She could picture it restored, filled with light and purpose. But could she really go back to practicing law? The corruption she had fled in Boston existed here too. She had proven that. What would stop it from happening again? Her phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. "Story running tomorrow on State Bar reinstating your reputation. Quotes from 3 judges who say they were pressured to discredit you years ago. Justice comes late sometimes." May set the phone down and looked across her darkened fields. She had come to Pine Creek seeking escape, anonymity, peace. She had found those things for a time. But she had also found a community worth fighting for. The answer came to her with surprising clarity. She didn't have to choose between her 2 lives, the brilliant attorney and the simple farmer. She could be both. 6 months later, the Pine Creek Legal Aid Center opened its doors in the freshly renovated Miller building. Sunlight streamed through tall windows onto polished floors and walls lined with law books. A team of volunteer paralegals, including Frank Wilson and Ray from the records office, helped manage the constant flow of clients. May divided her time between the center and her farm, where she had installed a greenhouse to extend the growing season. She no longer hid her legal expertise, but she hadn't abandoned the peace she had found in working the soil either. On this particular morning, she walked through the quiet center before opening hours, straightening chairs and reviewing case files. The wall behind the reception desk displayed framed newspaper headlines chronicling the investigation and its results. Judge Reynolds faces federal charges. Westridge CEO pleads guilty. Farmland returned to original owners. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Eleanor stood outside with a young couple May didn't recognize. "Hope you don't mind the early visit," Eleanor said as May let them in. These folks drove from 3 counties over. Heard about what happened here and wanted your help. The man twisted his hat nervously. They're trying to take our dairy farm. Same playbook, sudden rezoning, impossible deadlines. Everyone says you're the only one who can help. May invited them to sit. As they explained their situation, she recognized the familiar patterns, the same corruption spreading like weeds. Through rural communities, we don't have much money. The woman added apologetically. The center operates on a sliding scale, May assured them. No one is turned away. After they left with an appointment to return, Eleanor lingered. You look happy, she observed. Happier than when you were just hiding on your farm. May smiled. I spent years running from corruption instead of fighting it. That was my mistake. Well, you're making up for lost time. The state attorney general's office called again yesterday, asking if you'd consult on their rural land fraud task force. May nodded. I said I'd help, but only part-time. I've got tomatoes to plant next week. Eleanor laughed. The brilliant lawyer who still gets her hands dirty. Pine Creek hit the jackpot when you moved here. As they walked outside, May paused to look at the building's new sign. Pine Creek Legal Aid Center with smaller text beneath reading. Justice takes root. Like her vegetables, justice required patience, constant attention, and occasional fierce protection against those who would destroy it. Some battles would be lost, but with persistence the harvest would come. Mei Lin Chen, farmer, lawyer, fighter, had finally found her true calling. Not in running from corruption, but in standing firmly against it, feet planted in the soil she loved, defending those who couldn't defend themselves.